Okay, folks, buckle up, because we're diving into some serious stuff today. This is one of those stories that just makes you go, whoa, hold on a minute.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the Syrian rebels, those fighters who have been battling the Assad regime for, well, seems like forever now.
Right.
And they've just done something that, frankly, nobody expected. They took Aleppo.
Yeah.
Aleppo, folks, if you need a little refresher, that's a major city in Syria, one that's been under government control since 2016.
Huge symbolic importance.
Exactly,
Yeah.
a symbol of Assad's power, and now it's gone, poof, vanished into thin air.
Well, not quite vanished, but
You know what I mean? It's a major blow to the government, a real turning point in the conflict.
I'd say so.
So let's bring in our expert to help us unpack all this, because honestly, this is a lot to process.
Yeah, there's so many layers here.
Exactly. So
Okay.
first things first, just how significant is this rebel victory? I mean, we've seen ups and downs in this conflict before, but this feels different.
It is different. This isn't just a small skirmish or a temporary setback for the government. This is a major strategic shift. Think about it. Aleppo has been a government stronghold for years, a symbol of their control, and now it's in the hands of the rebels.
So what does this mean for the balance of power in Syria? I mean, is this the beginning of the end for Assad, or is it too early to say?
It's definitely a blow to Assad's regime. There's no doubt about that. But whether it's the beginning of the end, well, that's a tough question to answer right now. It depends on a lot of factors: how the rebels manage this victory, how the government responds, what the international community does.
Okay, so let's back up a bit. For those who haven't been following every twist and turn of this conflict, can you give us a quick recap of the situation in Syria leading up to this point?
Sure. So Syria has been embroiled in a brutal civil war for over a decade now. It started with protests against President Bashar al-Assad's rule back in 2011. Those protests were met with violence by the government, and things quickly spiraled into a full-blown armed conflict.
And it's not just a fight between the Syrian government and the rebels, right? There are all these other players involved too, right?
Absolutely. It's a real tangled web. You've got Russia and Iran backing the Assad regime, while various rebel groups have received support from countries like Turkey and the United States, and then you've got other actors like ISIS complicating things further.
So it's a real mess, to put it mildly.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
So how did the rebels manage to pull this off? I mean, Aleppo seemed pretty impenetrable.
Right. Well, it seems the rebels have been learning and adapting. They've been getting more organized, more strategic, and they've been using new tactics and technologies.
Like what specifically?
Well, one thing that stands out is their use of drones. They've been using them for reconnaissance, for targeting, for even launching attacks. And this has given them a significant advantage against the government forces who haven't really caught up in that area.
Drones. Ah, that's interesting. You don't usually think of drones as being a major factor in a conflict like this.
It's definitely a game changer. It allows the rebels to strike with more precision, more surprise, and it also helps them to level the playing field against a more powerful adversary.
So it's not just about brute force anymore. It's about strategy and technology too.
Exactly, and I think that's what caught the government off guard. They underestimated the rebels' capabilities, and they paid the price.
Okay, so Aleppo is in rebel hands now. What happens next? What does this mean for the future of the conflict?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a huge victory for the rebels, no doubt about it. But it's not the end of the story. There's still a lot of unknowns. How will the rebels govern Aleppo? Can they maintain order? Can they provide services to the people? Will they use it as a base to launch further attacks?
And what about the Syrian government? How are they going to react to this loss?
They're definitely reeling from this defeat. They've already launched airstrikes in rebel-held areas, but that's just a temporary measure. They're going to have to come up with a more comprehensive strategy, and that's where things get tricky. Well, they have some tough choices to make. Do they try to retake Aleppo, risking a costly and protracted battle? Or do they focus on consolidating their control elsewhere? And what about their allies, Russia and Iran? Are they going to double down on their support, or are they going to start rethinking their involvement?
So it's a real dilemma for them.
Absolutely, and the decisions they make will have major consequences for the future of Syria.
And speaking of consequences, let's talk about the humanitarian situation. I mean, Aleppo has been through so much already. What does this latest development mean for the people who live there?
It's a real concern. Aleppo has already been devastated by years of war, and now with this change in control, there's a risk of further instability, further violence, and a displacement of people.
So it's a really precarious situation for the civilians caught in the middle.
Sadly, yes. And it's important to remember that behind all the strategic talk, all the geopolitical maneuvering, there are real people whose lives are being upended by this conflict.
Absolutely. We can't forget about them.
No, we can't.
So where do we go from here? I mean, is there any hope for peace in Syria after all this?
It's hard to be optimistic, but I wouldn't say all hope is lost. This rebel victory could potentially create new opportunities for negotiations, new possibilities for a political solution, but it's going to require a lot of effort, a lot of goodwill from all sides.
And a lot of luck, probably.
Probably, yeah.
Well, this is a story that's far from overvied. Folks will be keeping a close eye on developments and bringing you updates as they happen. But in the meantime, I think it's important for all of us to take a moment to reflect on the human cost of this conflict and to hope that one day peace will prevail.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep those critical thinking caps on because the world needs more of that.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious.